Hello and welcome to the fourth instalment of our Dulux Decorator Centre Industry Insights webinar series. So over the past couple of months, we've spent our time focusing in on how we as an industry have had to adapt and change to the challenges that 2020 have thrown at us, and how we can come together collectively to build back better. And what's become abundantly clear over the past couple of months, and with the continued change to restrictions, it's fostered a greater sense of uncertainty in the general public, whether that's people that are sending their children back to schools, people that are returning to the high street, people that are booking hotels. And we all play a role in helping to rebuild confidence that the environment that people are in is as safe as it possibly can be. And giving building users the reassurance that they're learning, socialising, or working in a clean and safe environment is absolutely vital. And whether you're a building owner, a facilities manager, an architect, a designer, a contractor, it's absolutely vital and important now more than ever that we look at innovative solutions to help us rebuild that confidence for the general public. I think we're all aware of the smaller measures that are in place, be it hygiene, sanitation, social distancing. A lot of these are now successfully in place in a lot of these environments. So the attention is starting to turn more to what else we can do and what role the actual environment and the building fabric plays in rebuilding that confidence and giving people a safe environment to work in. Building design, including paint and coatings, is an area that we believe can help provide some of those new innovative solutions to enhance protection. So to help us flesh out this topic and go through it today, I'm delighted to introduce our guest panelists, starting with Rosemary Jensen. So Rosemary is a leading architect in the healthcare sector. So Rosemary, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
We're also joined by our very own Duncan Lockhead, the Commercial Sustainability Manager for AkzoNobel. So good afternoon, Duncan.
Hiya.
And making a repeat appearance after a fantastic performance, helping us launch Scuff Shield last month, we are rejoined by Gary Jefferson from AkzoNobel's Research and Development team. So welcome back, Gary.
All right, good afternoon all.
Good afternoon. Okay, before we jump into the detail today, we've got a couple of questions that we wanted to pose to you as an audience as well today. So what you will see come up on your screen in a second is the first of three questions that we wanted to ask throughout the course of today's webinar. So the first question that we have that you should see come up on your screen now is, are your customers or clients asking more questions now about hygiene and well-being? So it's a simple yes and no. So you should see on your screen in front of you the question and the boxes yes or no. So are your customers or your clients asking more questions now about hygiene and well-being? And I don't think it comes as a massive surprise, but 80% of respondents to that question are saying that yes, customers or clients are starting to ask more questions about hygiene and well-being. So hopefully that means that we are on the right course for the topic that we wanted to discuss today. So without further ado, I wanted to turn over to the first of our guest panelists today. So Rosemary, it'd be brilliant if we could bring you in first, please. And can you give us an insight into your work in the healthcare sector?
Sure. Thank you for that, Oliver. I think if we can just click onto this slide.
Looks like we have there we go.
We're here. Great. All right, thank you very much, and thank you very much for inviting me to talk today. So I'll just cover in the next 10-15 minutes really my perspective. So a little bit of background about who I am. I wear many hats professionally and in the pastimes that I participate in. And I think it's fair to say COVID-19 has had an impact across all of these. So I act both as an independent healthcare design advisor, as a healthcare architect. I also lead the Procure 22 Framework Design Working Group, which are part of the National Efficiency and Productivity Programme. I also represent that framework, P22, on the Future Standards Working Group, who are the group responsible through NHS E&I for updating and publishing both the health building notes and the health technical memoranda, which set the standards in healthcare. And more recently, I've been supporting the P22 COVID-19 Project Management Office, the PMO, which has supported the delivery of a number of Nightingale schemes and also a number of COVID-19 responses, working closely with healthcare trusts. I also focus and undertake a lot of research and analysis in terms of pre and post occupancy evaluations to actually look to learn lessons and share those nationally, and undertake the design champion role across a number of award-winning schemes. I guess all of these in the current climate, including, interestingly, my pastimes, are about just assessing risk and trying to deliver safe environments, as well as safely participating in activities to protect my mental well-being as well as my professional one. So just moving on then, in terms of my experience base. So a little bit of background. I, as I've said, champion evidence and experience-based design. I've supported scheme developments from concept stage through to completion across all fields within healthcare, from specialist tertiary to general acute, through to primary, community and mental health care facilities, both new build and refurbishment, and both within the Procure national frameworks and outside. Quite often I work with and alongside other architects, as well as directly for trust clients in an advisory capacity and representing KIR, one of the 6 PSCPs on the P22 framework. Shown here are a few of the schemes I've had the pleasure to work on and revisit in use. And I was, from qualifying, in 1995 to 2012, I was Director and Head of Healthcare for Devereux Architects, before setting up as a sole practitioner and an independent healthcare design advisor under the banner of Jensen Architecture, focusing on smarter healthcare. You just click on to the next slide. It's amazing the difference a splash of colour can make, and I guess we're going to come on to that in the discussions today. Healthcare architecture and design is all about collaboration and building on the experience base to develop the next level of exemplar designs and the next evidence base. It's about making the most of the opportunities to deliver added value across healthcare schemes, and we all recognise the inherent benefits that colour brings, and I guess we're going to talk a little bit more now today about specification and detail and innovation on the actual finishes themselves. So we'll just move on to the next slide. So as part of my role within the Procure 22 Efficiency and Productivity Programme, I worked very closely with teams at both Dulux and Target. We recognised that both were independently undertaking research into the impact of colours within the healthcare environment. And by collaborating, we developed the evidence-based P22 healthcare colour palette, which is shown here. If you just click onto the next one. It's an interactive PDF toolkit which captures the evidence base and promotes a palette of colours coordinated with the P22 repeatable rooms. Now, this was launched in October 2017, with the interactive PDF launched in February the following year. It is available to download from the Procure 22 Club website, but importantly, it was all around collaboration and innovation to make the evidence and experience base accessible to all. Colour, it doesn't cost a lot more. It does require a little more thought and consideration, but we shouldn't shy away from its use. And hopefully this toolkit encourages that and enables our healthcare clients to ask some well-informed questions as interior designs are being developed. And we do know that colour can make the world of difference in transforming a healthcare environment and creating a really positive distraction. So that's a bit of the background. And now, in terms of where we are and my experience of that, if we just click onto the next one. Good old Benjamin Franklin quote there, out of adversity comes opportunity. And I think that's exactly where we are now mid-pandemic with COVID-19 and our response. So if we just click onto the next one. In June this year, the World Economic Forum launched the Great Reset. It was an opportunity to rebuild in a different way, from the green reset, the economic reset, the work reset, which we're all experiencing, and the public sector reset, which is at our heart. It's no longer acceptable to compromise when it comes to health sector investment, strategy, and development. So this really is an opportunity. This, on the next slide, I'm just going to run through, in the time available, the current challenges as I see them in healthcare design. And it's my personal view, supported by 25 years of specialising in healthcare design. And I guess now 8 months into the lockdown in Oxfordshire. It is an informed view, having been at the heart of the COVID-19 response, working with Public Health England, NHS England and NHS Improvement, along with the Procure 22 framework. And it's been about combining forces to better support trusts working on the front line during this pandemic. So these are my top 7 thoughts to support exemplar healthcare design and creating safe, hygienic and supportive healthcare environments. So just focusing on the first, we just click on. Thank you. We know the environmental cost of the NHS, the carbon footprint of the construction industry, and this is an opportunity to contribute to the green economic work and social reset advocated by the World Health Economic Forum in June, combined with national and local responses. There are known changes which have a significant impact, and we cannot go back to the way we were. The UK government has committed to reaching net zero carbon by 2050, and the NHS, within its document launched at the beginning of this month, has set some more stringent targets. The net zero means significantly reducing emissions as well as offsetting using carbon capture, such as planting trees. But the health and care system in England is responsible for an estimated 4 to 5% of the country's carbon footprint. So it has a major role to play in supporting the delivery of this. The NHS has committed to reaching net zero as soon as possible. And this report examines a number of areas critical to carbon reduction across the NHS, including estates and facilities. And it's well worth a read. So if you haven't read it already, I would commend you to do so. And we know that global construction is also under pressure to review and to decarbonise. And whether that's about using materials more efficiently, making better use of the building stock that we already have, switching to lower emission materials, as well as recycling building materials and components, and generally using lower emission machinery, but being more progressive in terms of the targets and also addressing behaviours when it comes to environmental impact. So my second point on the next slide is a really important one and very timely as we're ramping up currently in terms of the different tiers across the country. Maintaining access to healthcare during the pandemic and future health emergencies is vital. Healthcare design has a role to play in this in terms of emergency preparedness, designing flexibly and applying standardisation as an agenda item with recent lessons learned during the pandemic, including recognising the impact and protecting against staff fatigue, protecting staff as well as patient well-being, creating one-way flows within our hospitals and within units themselves, the green and red, our new language of designated zones within hospitals in responding to C19, and then simple areas around hygiene in terms of areas for clinical wash hand basins at entry for both public and staff and exit, as well as the much talked about PPE, don on, don off, and in general creating more space. The third and fourth points on the next slide I've sort of brought together, mindful of time. The NHSE business case targets have now set clearly defined targets for modern methods of construction, or MMC as it's called. So 50% MMC for refurbishment and 70% for new build. It is yet unclear whether that's, we assume it's by value, but it will be an interesting challenge for the paint and coatings market moving forward. And the key words that we've been looking at recently are around repeatability, standardisation, platform design, all to meet the government construction strategy targets. We've also heard about the Health Infrastructure Programme, or the HIP 1 and 2, which was launched last autumn, the 2.7 billion promise for 6 new hospitals by 2025 and 100 million of seed funding for up to 34 other hospitals to be delivered between 25 and 35. And all of these and all of our projects that we're delivering currently are now focusing on the 5 ministerial priorities. And those are standardisation, technology, the best design for patient flow, sustainability, and very close to my heart, but aligned with the others, design and creating environments that we can really be proud of. There's also positively a commitment to make some of the capital regime less bureaucratic and to be able to work at pace to deliver these changes and share these innovations and best practice. So just moving on then to items 5 and 6, which I've again grouped together. It is absolutely about focusing on outcomes and using modelling and simulating testing in the design environment to become ever more conversant and familiar with the reading of those outcomes and the information and the insight that they are providing to support exemplar healthcare design. And those outcomes are now measured across patient experience, staff experience, as well as service outcomes and the outcomes of the building itself in terms of things like cleaning costs and maintenance time. The role of technology and digital in smarter healthcare environments is another one that's key, and this is one of the good news stories that's come out of the pandemic, is the acceleration of the use of technology. We now have 95% of GPs who are currently providing remote consultation from their patients. I don't think 10 months ago we would have set that as a realistic target. 88% of GPs believe greater use of remote consultation should now be retained for the longer term, and 77% believe the use of video technology for virtual multidisciplinary team meetings, clinical meetings and medical boards should be retained in the longer term. So we can see a time when a healthcare building looks very different and is better able to respond to the changing demands with potentially higher acuity and comorbidity of the patients that we have. And then just moving on to the penultimate slide and the item number 7 really, and it's a key point in terms of responding to the pandemic, is that it is physical, not social distancing. We are using technology to protect mental health, but we need to make sure that we don't lose sight of the well-founded evidence base in creating therapeutic and supportive healthcare environments which support physical and mental health by championing outcomes through design, meeting the government and NHS delivery targets, applying and building on the evidence base, including colour, lighting, views out, and contact with nature represented by outdoor space. So I think we're all becoming more conversant and familiar with the impact of the pandemic, both short, medium and long term. It has raised the profile, in my experience, of specification, finishes and cleaning, as well as spaces, volume and air quality in recognising the role of the building fabric within healthcare environments. So just onto the last slide. I think absolutely Benjamin Franklin hit the nail on the head. Out of adversity comes real opportunity, and in sharing some of those learnings, we can begin to share the benefits of those responses. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rosemary. I'm definitely going to be stealing that last slide for a number of other presentations I might be doing in the future. I've got a really long list of questions. Again, I'm conscious of time, so I'll cherry pick the ones that I think are the most useful for what we've discussed. I think the first one is, I think what's going to be clear is the healthcare sector and the aspects you've talked about are going to be at the cutting edge of how we can build back better. I guess a question that I just wanted to ask you is, do you think that the majority of those are, I guess, challenges and priorities that go past the healthcare sector and they go into a number of other commercial and public sector areas as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think what's good for your well-being in a healthcare environment is probably also good for your well-being in a commercial or educational sector. Certainly, I think health is at the cutting edge. in terms of the support and the response, but it does trickle down, I think, into all of the environments that we've spoken about.
And I've got another fairly specific one, but it's when you're talking about your involvement in the Nightingale projects, and it goes back to the very first webinar that we did was with the COO of Wilmot Dixon. And one of the points that he was making was that there's a real need to improve efficiencies in construction. So it's great that you start talking about off-site construction and different methods that need to be employed. And do you think there are learnings from those Nightingale projects, because they just seem to shoot up so quickly and so efficiently?
I mean,
with great examples?
Yeah, there are learnings at all levels, I think, from the Nightingale projects. You know, they were delivered in 28 days, and it required a different way of working. I wouldn't say that they are it's sort of exemplars for anything other than field hospitals, but they were responding to the pandemic, and the collaboration, I think, is the key piece of learning, not only with the NHS and the MOD and the contractors and the designers involved, but the cross collaboration actually between different contractors, certainly in terms of the way the framework responded by actually pooling 6 national contractors working together, is something that we could all learn from moving forward.
Yeah, completely agree. I might park some of my other questions if we get time at the end. I'll bring them back to the table again. Clearly some really useful insight there for all of us. I think actually something that struck home to me as you were going through it is, I think some of the content that we'll go through around painting coatings is about overcoming that immediate challenge. And there's a slide that Duncan has shown many a time that shows 3 different waves. And it shows the immediate challenge that we have is COVID-19, followed by a bigger wave that is an economic impact, followed by an even bigger wave that is the long-term environmental impact that is round the corner. And actually, there's a big opportunity that this is broader than just the immediate challenge. It's how we use this, as that quote says, that out of that adversity comes great long-term opportunity and pressing that reset button. So I think there's a really key point there for me. Right, we are going to jump back to our second poll question, if we can get it onto the screen all right this time. So you should see another question come up on the screen in a second. And the question is, so moving this conversation on slightly, do you currently consider hygiene requirements when choosing paint? Or for the contractors that are on the call, are you seeing your clients consider hygiene requirements when they're choosing paint? Right, okay, so we've got 75% of respondents that said yes, they are currently considering hygiene requirements when choosing paint, which is fantastic. It's a fantastic build to the next part of our section actually, and it highlights that conversation is trickling down from client requirements to building fabric to the selection and the specification of paint. And Rosemary's taken us through the challenges that are inherent within the healthcare sector, and in fact in all commercial and public sectors that we operate in. And we want to move the conversation now to the role that paint and coatings can play in positively impacting a safe working environment and helping people with the hygiene regimes. And there's a stat that I pull out quite a bit that I thought was quite relevant to this point, that in a traditional building, between 70 and 80% of all the visible surfaces, all the visible building fabric is painted, or it has some form of coating on it. So it's great actually that clients are starting to see that it plays an active role. To start us off, Duncan, I wanted to bring you into the conversation first. There's obviously products that are already available in the market and used fairly extensively in the healthcare sector. Do you want to talk to us about those products in a bit more detail?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Ollie, and thank you, Rosemary. That was fascinating. I've made lots of notes. Yeah, so we've heard from Rosemary lots of excellent content, but we've heard it from others in the industry too about how we're having to adapt, and make spaces clean, safe, and hygienic. And yes, Ollie, we do have great hygiene coatings actually in different bits of AkzoNobel. And it's actually quite a surprise to hear that poll result, because from my perspective, I often think of our hygiene coatings as one of our best kept secrets. You know, and not many people know about them, not many people specify them, not many people use them, or not enough. So let's talk about those hygiene coatings. So if we start with decorative hygiene coatings, and I'm here talking about what's on the screen, primarily Stericyld Diamond Matte and Diamond Eggshell. So those decorative hygiene coatings, they have to kind of do three things well. First of all, they have to keep surfaces hygienic by reducing bacterial populations. Usually we're talking about on wall surfaces. The second thing they have to do, they have to be robust. So they have to be able to withstand, you know, if you think about hospital corridors, for example, they have to withstand a fair degree of wear and tear, you know, day-to-day wear and tear. But actually now more so than ever, because of the more frequent and more aggressive cleaning regimes that are in place. And the third thing they have to do, relating back to what Rosemary is saying, is they have to look great. And that's from a color and an aesthetic perspective. So yeah, Stericyld Diamond Matte and Diamond Eggshell do all of those things, you know, available in the full Dulux trade color range, and from a wear and a hygiene perspective, you know, backed up by, you know, really robust testing data. I guess the new news is that the active ingredient in Stericyld, a silver bactericide, on the back of more recent and thorough testing, we can now say that Stericyld inhibits bacteria from just 2 hours after contamination. So our previous position was 12 hours. So that's a significant improvement. So that's decorative hygiene coatings. And Sarah, if we could just move the slide on. Now there are some situations, and thinking about healthcare particularly, if we think about operating theatres, there are some situations where decorative hygiene coatings are just not enough. And we have a sister company called Flex Group, still part of AkzoNobel, who produce a coating, manufacture a coating called Biodex HB. Now it's kind of an entirely different beastie. You know, it's a much thicker coating, probably 3 or 4 times the dry film thickness that you would get from Stericyld, and elastomeric. In other words, extremely flexible, and that's really important in operating theatres, because what you don't want is any kind of crack or break in the coating, even if it has to cope with slight movement from the substrate underneath. So thick, elastomeric, and still with the antimicrobial, antibacterial active ingredient as well. And so if you could just move on to the next slide, the last area, which is it's not really, we're not in the land of coatings that are generally applied by decorators, but it is relevant to any architects or specifiers watching. So we do also have antimicrobial powder coatings available from a different bit of AkzoNobel called Interpon. Now these coatings are generally applied, as a powder and then cured by heat or UV, and they're generally applied in manufacturing environments. And if you want to get a feel for what they look like. If you think about if you're stood in a bus and you're holding on to the vertical handrail or the back of the seat in front, generally they are coated in very bright colours now to help with the visually impaired. But they are generally powder coatings, you know, very smooth, no brush marks in that. So yeah, they're applied in lots of different environments. So the window frames on the shard are coated with Interpon powder coatings. But if you think about hospital environments, you know, powder coated door handles or the frames of beds, you kind of quickly get the gist that of how important antimicrobial powder coatings can be. So 3 different examples of hygiene coatings in the AkzoNobel family, and just the last point, Ollie, we've kind of concentrated, talked a little bit about other sectors, but we've concentrated on the healthcare setting. But what we are seeing now, and rightly so, is the broader specification and use of hygiene coatings in all sorts of other sectors. So, you know, kind of an extension from healthcare would be care homes, but then we're also seeing sort of sheltered accommodation in schools, in hotels, you know, in food preparation areas across many different sectors, food production sites. So kind of the crux of what I'm saying here is that, you know, we do need to think more imaginatively and more broadly about where we use and specify hygiene coatings, because it's all about giving and providing reassurance to all of us as we start to venture back out into the world. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's we're touching on with Rosemary. I think it starts with healthcare, but there are some brilliant learnings that will help people in a commercial sector give that confidence back to the general public using their spaces. Gary, you've waited very patiently and quietly. Can you tell us the products that Duncan's talked about? How do they actually work technically?
Yeah, no, thanks, Ollie, and it was great to listen patiently and hear, you know, how it's developing in the market and expanding from, yeah, Dom said historically what we thought really as pure kind of healthcare environment. So it's an interesting time. So yeah, what do we look for in products, or what do we want from products in those considerations, and what do we design into those products to meet the needs and the performance that are required in those environments? So there's kind of, I think, I put 2 key aspects. I kind of take for granted that it needs to carry on looking good because it needs to look good, but that's definitely one of the key things that we're looking for from the product. We're looking for the cleanability of the product. So the first line of defense in keeping really any environment hygienic and clean is for a kind of cleaning and disinfecting protocols, as you'll see in hospitals and many healthcare environments. So the products need to withstand those regimes and stay looking good, you know, stay looking at a nice finish and bring that decorative aspect to the market. So what SteriShield and some of the hygiene products that we have also bring is the kind of, say, the kind of gaps between the cleaning and disinfecting of those areas. So the cleaning and disinfecting either physically removes the bacterial microbe, or in the case of disinfectants, kills those bacterial microbes. But in between those cleaning regimes, often when the actual area is being used, products like SteriShield that have silver in the product, an active material, reduces the risks in those kind of inter-cleaning periods. And the active material in there effectively kills the germs or reduces the population of the germs more quickly than would naturally happen. So we're looking for these 2 aspects from the product. And the next couple of slides will go into a bit more detail of how does it deliver that performance around against the cleanability regimes, and how does the active work against the bacteria, basically. So we'll go to the next slide. So kind of digging into the cleaning and disinfecting. So cleaning and disinfecting are similar but different in some aspects. So cleaning is really around the physical removal of dirt or grime or bacteria. And this can be anything from just water itself to water with surfactants, kind of washing up, different cleaning agents. But it's really about the physical removal of the bacteria and dirt from the surface. So we design our product to withstand that kind of standard kind of cleaning regime, as we call it. We test our products to an internationally recognized standard. It's called the scrub test, and I'll tell you a little bit about what that means. But basically what we do is we take our products, SteriShield or Diamond products, and we do a paint drawdown, and we put a surfactant solution, which is effectively like a diluted washing up liquid on the surface paint film. And we then take a scrub pad, which is similar to a Brillo pad, and we move the Brillo pad across the surface of the paint film a number of times. For our most durable products like SteriShield and Diamond, we do this for up to 2,000, sometimes even 10,000 times. It's a very extreme test. I wouldn't necessarily recommend going and cleaning your wall with a Brillo pad, but you could if you wanted to, because we've tested it under those kind of regimes. But obviously it can withstand those kind of conditions, and the kind of standard cleaning protocols that you'd experience in hospitals and these other environments now, where you're looking for a much stronger hygiene regime, then the products are designed and fit for purpose. SteriShield is also part of the Diamond range, so it brings all the performance attributes you'd expect from a Diamond product, stain resistance, as well as this general washability and cleanability. So it stays looking good under these kind of these conditions. So that's the kind of standard cleaning. You then got disinfection. So this is using either chemicals, so things like hydrogen peroxide, which is a standard disinfectant agent. It's often the material that's used when you're in this fogging technique, when you effectively close the room, you fog the room, and that kills the bacteria on the walls and the surfaces. You can use bleach or steam cleaning is also a kind of temperature approach to killing bacteria. So SteriShield is tested, and Diamond are tested against all of these materials, which are the standard approaches to killing or disinfecting surfaces from bacteria. So that's the cleaning and the disinfecting. So this is how the product stands up to those cleaning regimes and stays looking good. But what about those kind of periods in between the cleaning and disinfection, which we talked about? So that's the next slide, where we talk about the materials that we have in the paint, which kill bacteria or stop bacteria growing in those kind of intercleaning, disinfecting periods. So the approach we use in SteriShield and in the Interpron products that Duncan talked about is using silver. So silver has been known by humankind as a way of killing microbes before people even knew what microbes were. So kind of some of the earliest references to use of silver for defeating microbes was the chap on the top left-hand corner, who is Cyrus the Great, who was a king around 2,500 years ago in Persia. And he's documented that his soldiers carried water in silver containers, and it was found that the water maintained its drinkability for long periods of time. Obviously, it was stopping microbial growth and keeping it drinkable, and before they even knew what microbes were. More recently, a lot more recently, silver's been used in bandages, in plasters for helping wounds and cuts kind of heal more quickly. And probably at the most high-tech end, silver's used in the drinking systems on the International Space Station to keep the water drinkable for the astronauts, basically. So it's got a long history, a very long history of use. So we use a form of silver in SteriShield and Interpron. Silver affects bacteria in kind of 3 different ways. So it stops them multiplying and growing from the numbers that are already there. It disrupts the kind of nutrients pathway. So the food that it has in the cell, it stops the cell, the bacteria from accessing that, and it also breaks down the kind of the outer membrane of the bacteria. So in different ways, it affects the bacteria and stops it ultimately in its tracks. So we have the active, we put it in our products, and then we've tested the products very thoroughly, as Duncan mentioned, using independent laboratories, international standards for testing of hygiene coatings. So these are some examples of the bacteria that we've tested against. There are more bacteria than the one shows, but these are some of the ones you will have heard about in terms of relations to illnesses caused particularly in hospitals, such as MRSA and E. coli. So the graphs on the right, basically the vertical axis is the number of bacteria. So we take a paint coating, we put some bacteria onto the paint coating, and then we regularly sample the surface of the paint coating to count how many bacteria there are over time. So on the graph, the vertical axis is the number of bacteria, and the horizontal axis is time. So we have paints with silver and without silver. The paints without silver, the kind of magenta, kind of pink line, and the paints with silver, the yellow lines. And what you can see is the yellow line drops off much more rapidly than the pink line, indicating that the silver in the coatings is having a beneficial effect, reducing the bacteria on the surface much more quickly than the paint, basically without silver. And that's really the kind of testing that behind SteriShield, and shows its benefit in the lab, but also more importantly in the real world. So that's a bit of a whistle-stop tour of SteriShield and how.
Brilliant, thank you, Gary, and well done for getting Cyrus the Great into one of these webinars. That will take some topping, so well done. Duncan, I think both you and Gary have touched on durability as well. I think there's obviously a need and a proposition that we've got with SteriShield, but I guess with an enhanced cleaning regime that a lot of environments are having to put in place now, there's going to be a much greater focus on durability, isn't there?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, I mean, SteriShield is we should be using it more widely, but it's not going to be the right thing, the right solution everywhere. And sadly, what we do see is we still see a lot of very basic emulsions being used and specified in high wear areas. That's, that can be because maybe there's a very vague spec in place, or maybe there's no spec at all in place, and consequently the lowest cost paint is chosen. And the shame of it is it just results in areas looking shabby, very quickly, and having to be frequently, redecorated. And that's exactly what we don't want at the moment. We don't want, hospital corridors and wards, any space really, being out of action for, on a regular basis for maintenance. But what we do want, and this is where the diamond range comes in. What we do want is we want those walls. We want the decorative finishes to be, as we've said, robust and intact and looking great for as long as possible. So the Dulux, the diamond range encompasses. So we've got wall paints, so particularly diamond matte and diamond eggshell. We've got the hygiene coatings we talked about, but we've also got waterborne coatings for trim, for example, diamond satin wood, and we've got diamond glaze for wooden floors and bar tops, that type of area. And where budgets are super tight, not on the slide, but where budgets are super tight and paint doesn't have to last for quite so long, Armstead Durable Matte is a really good value for money wall paint, durable wall paint option. Yeah. And when we think about budget, if we can extend the maintenance cycle in a high wear area from, let's say, 2 years to 4 or 5 years, that's where we're going to make the big saving. From a budget perspective, we're going to be, as we know, with decorative projects, the cost of labour is 80 to 90% of the project. So that's a significant cost saving. But we're also going to see a significant carbon saving because we're not doing, we're not repainting. The decorators don't have to drive to the site, and that's what we see when we're quite frequently when we're using our life cycle modelling tool. You know, that significant cost and carbon saving over an extended period. So yeah, all of these things, you know, the hygiene coatings, the durable coatings, they're all helping to adapt to maintaining spaces in a very different way in these different times.
Thank you very much, Duncan. We've very shortly we're going to open up this to a live Q&A. So for anybody that is watching, on the right hand side on your control panel, you'll see a box that says questions. So if you want to put any questions to any of our guest panelists, or even to myself, if I can answer them, please do so, and we'll come back to those in a second. Before we do that, we have one last question that we would like to ask our attendees and our listeners today. And that question is, are you going or are you planning to make any changes to how you are designing buildings due to COVID-19? And again, for the contractors that we've got that are listening in today, are you seeing these changes coming through from your clients? Right, so interestingly, probably about 2/3 of people are saying yes, they are going to be making changes to how they're designing buildings. 33% saying no. And I think there's a couple of parts for me to this, that there are some immediate changes that will help overcome some of the immediate challenges with COVID-19. But I do just go back to some of the points that Rosemary was saying, that it's an opportunity to look broader and look beyond the immediate challenge and look to the challenges that are coming ahead of that, or sorry, coming behind that. Right, so I think we will move now to any questions that we've got from our audience for our guest panelists today. So anything that's come through, I should be able to see on my screen. There's one that's come up that's fairly relevant actually to some of the points Gary and Duncan you were making around how we test the durability of products. I'm maybe going to send this your way, Duncan, but chip in, Gary, if you can help. What would you recommend to use for facilities managers or building users to help clean the wall effectively while still maintaining the integrity of the product?
I guess that's probably that's a nice tricky one. Thanks, Ollie. I guess that's getting at what's the right kind of level of cleaning agent to use. I do know that the guidance from the NHS is to use 1% of ammonia. But no more than 1% of ammonia in your water when you're cleaning the surface down. But any of those materials that Gary mentioned, the hydrogen peroxide is frequently used. But anything, you know, from a bleaching perspective, anything containing ammonia will, as long as it's not too strong, it is still going to do that effective cleaning bit without, you know, significantly damaging the surface. Yeah. Anything to add to that?
Yeah, no, I think it's really depending on obviously on the situation, I think, of the problem you're trying to solve. But I think we gave some examples of the different cleaning regimes, depending if it's a hygiene issue or it's just general cleaning and washing. So I think those ones we mentioned, and the ammonia you mentioned, if that's the kind of standard protocol for that building, then it's nothing to worry about in terms of our coatings. I guess if there's anything different or unusual, then I think it's obviously to contact Dulux and just check. But generally, yeah, the coatings will stand up to pretty much any of the cleaning regimes that you that I'm aware of, anyways.
Yeah, I would just add to that. Actually, we do have some fairly detailed guidance on cleaning regimes to support the use of diamond mat in particular in a commercial environment. So for anybody that wants to dig into any more detail on that, just ask your account manager, because that information is available for us to use. Gary, there's a question that's come through that I think is well, it's directed specifically at you. How do we go about, it says Gary in the question, how do you go about developing products like this in AkzoNobel? I think it's maybe a little bit more insight around how we manage an innovation pipeline and bring products to market.
So yeah, I mean, I kind of have a kind of team of people working on various innovations. So we'll have a kind of funnel of innovations, and we also have technology teams looking at the kind of the riskier, kind of longer term platforms. So we're kind of looking at, you know, out to products that could be delivered, you know, up to 10 years or even further that kind of higher risk. So we have a group of you know, a set of projects at various stages, and we kind of prioritize them with the business, but obviously reacting to kind of how the market's changing, and obviously over the last 12 months changed very significantly in terms of what people are looking for in certain aspects. So we'll have a portfolio of projects, and we'll be working on at various speeds with the teams, the R&D teams. In AkzoNobel, you know, and there'll be a steady stream of projects kind of coming through into launch, you know, probably one or two every year or so in the wall paints area. Yeah, but yeah, really reacting to what the market wants in terms of priority. I don't know if that answers the question.
Yeah, it does. That's really useful. So I've got a couple for you, Rosemary, that will probably take us to the end. The first one starts with saying we love colour, which I guess that part is not a question. Do you think that the role of colour in design will grow in prevalence in the future?
I hope so. I think it's an interesting area, certainly in terms of the healthcare sector, where architects and interior designers are generally working very closely with end user clients and wider stakeholder groups. And with that always comes challenge, because I think everyone has a view around colour, which is, as well as the evidence and experience base, is also biased by sort of local or personal preferences. So I think colour has an increasing role to play. I think we shouldn't shy away from using colour, and recognizing that actually the impact it can have in terms of providing a positive distraction, whether people like it or dislike it, it's still eliciting a response, which actually in itself supports well-being. So I definitely believe that there is an increasing role and importance for colour, and that sits alongside the recognition and the increasing role of access to outdoor space and nature as well. So I think those two sit alongside each other in terms of the learning and some of the takeaways we can develop from that.
Yeah, I'm not sure it leaves a positive impact having a big wall in my office in blood red.
It certainly has an impact.
Yes, and in fact it could do with being a bit more calming. And then the last question we're going to end with, again for you, Rosemary. Out of all of the changes and the aspirations that you set out over the next 12 months, what do you think the biggest change is going to be in the healthcare sector?
Whew, that's a big one. I think the biggest change is going to be around standardization. and trying to move away from bespoking each and every project. So obviously we've sort of rolled out standardization at a rooms level, but I think certainly in terms of the direction of travel from the guidance centrally, there'll be a greater focus on standardization and sharing lessons learned nationally. So, you know, really in terms of models of care, there's too great a variance nationally, and following on from that, you then get variance in the design. And I think certainly the next 12 months we'll see more of a sort of a platform approach, a sort of a looser fit potentially in terms of some of the facilities that are being designed. But certainly from my perspective, there will be greater collaboration and control centrally around that standardization piece.
Brilliant. Sorry, I'm just writing notes for myself. I think we're coming to an end now. So there's one or two other questions, and what we'll do is, if there's any questions we've not had a chance to answer, we will answer you directly after the webinar today. All the content that we've gone through today, plus a little bit more, will be available on our hub on the website shortly after this, and you'll get an email to let you know when that information is available. There's been some really important points and some really interesting points that I think we've covered off today. I think, Rosemary, you mentioned some points there at the end that I think give a real positive flavour for the changes that can be made moving forward around standardisation, around efficiencies, and around collaboration. That through those we can unlock innovation, and we can give people the confidence back in the environments that they operate in the short term, and then hopefully in the long term help us to overcome some of those big waves that are lurking around the corner. So thank you everybody for bearing with us over the past hour. Hopefully you found it useful, and a big thank you to our guest panelists, but in particular Rosemary, I just wanted to extend a thank you for firstly giving us your time today, but secondly, it's clear you've been at the forefront of a lot of design developments within the healthcare sector, and a lot of the changes moving forwards that you're heavily involved in. So just thank you for leading the way, as you have done already for a number of years in that area. I think there's some great learnings, there's some great points that you've gone through that I think will help everybody that's listened and more as we move forward into the future. So thank you, Rosemary.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks all.